and welcome to this week's Did Shakespeare. And my name is Cassidy Cash, that's Shakespeare Girl. And this week I'm going to show you how you can plant your own Shakespeare Garden. Now, we should say right up front that there is no real rhyme or reason, a little bit of a pun there on Shakespeare, to the layout that you'll do for the Shakespeare Garden. What a Shakespeare Garden is just a themed garden around the idea of William Shakespeare. So there's lots of different ways that you can do that. You can pick plants to go in it that come from Shakespeare's plays. Other people put together Shakespeare Gardens based on what would have been typical for the time period when William Shakespeare lived. And still other people build some of the Tudor knot gardens that we've been covering in this course on Shakespeare and Gardens over the course of June this month. Any way you do it, it's a Shakespeare Garden. Some of the ways that you might want to do it, there are 175 plants mentioned in Shakespeare's plays, and I'm not going to go over every single one of them here today. But what I am going to do is give you a few examples of how you can plant a Shakespeare Garden for yourself, what kinds of plants that would include, and what features you would want to have in a Shakespeare Garden for it to be a Shakespeare Garden. And then you can get creative from there. So here's one to get started. Let's start with plants mentioned in Shakespeare's plays. Here are a few of my favorites. Posies are fun because they were originally called tussie-mussies or nosegays, and they were extremely fragrant flowers. Tussie-mussies were a popular display of wealth to have growing. I think tussie-mussie is amazing, so that should definitely go in your Shakespeare Garden. Posies, the word posy is mentioned in Merry Wives of Windsor, Act 3, Scene 1, and it is also mentioned in The Passionate Pilgrim by William Shakespeare. As far as I know, there's no reference to tussie-mussie in William Shakespeare's plays, although nosegays are mentioned in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Act 1, Scene 1. Next up is bachelor buttons. Now, if you search William Shakespeare's plays, you will not find a reference to bachelor's buttons, but that's because he didn't call them that. He referred to them simply as buttons. It shows up in Merry Wives of Windsor, Act 3, Scene 2. The host is talking of young Master Fenton, and he capers, he dances, he has eyes of youth, he writes verses, he speaks holiday, he smells April and May. He will carry it, 'tis his buttons, he will carry it. And the buttons there are again referring to the lapel flowers. This particular kind of flower was shaped like a button, and so it was called bachelor's buttons. And up until Victorian times, the bachelor buttons would go in your lapel, and if it lived a long time, that meant that your love life was going to be good. If it died, it meant your love life was going to be bad. So it had a lot of superstition and legend surrounding it as well, along with its unique shape. A Winter's Tale, Act 4, Scene 4, knocks out 5 different flowers, all in one reference. It says, here's flowers for you, hot lavender, menthes, savory marjoram, the marigold that goes to bed with the sun, and with him rises weeping. These are flowers of middle summer, and I think they are given to men of middle age. You're very welcome. So you've got lavender, mint, savory, marjoram, and the marigold. The fun thing about the marigold is it shows back up again in Pericles and Cymbeline, and the weeping is because in the morning, the marigold is weighed down by the dew, and so the dew would drip off the marigold, making the marigold look like it was crying. And then, of course, as the day went on and the dew dried off, the marigold would get bright and gay and show all of its color again. And so the marigold became an emblem of constancy and affection. However, for Tudor England, when William Shakespeare was alive, interestingly, the marigold was a sign of a fair weather friend, specifically a fair weather courtier, where they were only interested in you when things were good and everything looked favorable. And then if things got heavy, they kind of disappeared. Mint shows up in Love's Labour's Lost, Act 5, Scene 2. It says, I am that flower, that mint, that columbine. Wild Thyme shows up in A Midsummer Night's Dream. It's part of the beautiful passage that Oberon speaks when he says, I know a bank where the wild thyme blows, where oxlips and the nodding violet grows, quite over-canopied with this luscious woodbine, with sweet musk roses and with eglantine. It goes on to paint the picture of putting the ointment on the youth's eyes, and so he's going to see his lady when he wakes up and fall in love with her. It's a beautiful passage, but it knocks out wild thyme, violets, woodbine, and eglantine, which are also flower options you could include in your Shakespeare Garden. Chamomile is from Henry IV, Part 1. This one's kind of sneaky because it's not spelled the way we spell it today. When it shows up in William Shakespeare's play, he drops the H and it is spelled chamomile. And he says, the chamomile, the more it's trodden on, the faster it grows. It's a hardy little plant and quite beautiful. Also makes an excellent tea. So if you're looking for your garden to be as functional as it is beautiful, this one is a good choice. My last example of a plant from William Shakespeare's that you could plant in a Shakespeare garden of your own at home is parsley. It's a fun little section of Taming of the Shrew, Act 4, Scene 4, when Biondolo says, I knew a wench married in an afternoon, as she went to the garden for parsley to stuff a rabbit. And so may you, sir, and so adieu, sir. My master hath appointed me to go to St. Luke's to bid the priest be ready to come against you. Come with your appendix. There's so much to unpack there, I can't unpack it all, but it does reference parsley, which was the purpose of today's lesson. If you're interested in seeing all 175 plants and herbs mentioned in Shakespeare's plays, you should check out our episode with Garrett Kweli. That's episode 61 of That Shakespeare Life, and you can find her episode as well as a link to her book, Botanical Shakespeare, where she has put together all 175 with where they show up in Shakespeare's plays, along with beautiful illustrations. You can find more about her, listen to her episode, and find a link to the book at castycash.com/episode 61. Assuming you don't have a massive piece of land on which to put together your Shakespeare garden, I am going to suggest that it might make most practical sense to start with like 5 plants that you really enjoy. I'm going to recommend roses simply because that's what I'm working on at my house right now. David Austin grows unique roses. He breeds them and creates them. And he has one called the Sweet Juliet Rose. And I found this out and I went, oh my goodness. And it turns out David Austin has like a whole line of Shakespeare themed roses. Now he doesn't call them my Shakespeare line of roses. So you kind of have to know where to look, which is why I'm going to put the links to them in the show notes today for you. So you don't have to do all of the searching out for them that I did to put this list together. You can just click the link below. But you could start with like 5 of these roses and have a rose garden to start with. And then as you go see plays or as you learn things about Shakespeare, when you see something or learn something that you want to remember, you can commemorate it by adding a new plant to your garden. And I would suggest that you also put a memory plaque there and you say, on this date, I saw this play and this line stuck out to me. And to commemorate this moment in my life, I planted this as part of my Shakespeare garden. And then part of living your Shakespeare life would be to commemorate your Shakespeare memories or things that you find particularly beautiful by adding a new plant to your garden. And so then eventually you'll have a big Shakespeare garden, but you'll do it one plant at a time instead of trying to map out a big thing. That's a little more practical. Also pretty cool way to scrapbook your memories by planting a plant in the garden. So here are the roses from David Austin that are Shakespeare themed. David Austin has a William Shakespeare rose, this deep red, beautiful rose, and Ophelia rose. Ophelia is in Shakespeare's play Hamlet. We already mentioned the Sweet Juliet. Obviously Juliet is in Romeo and Juliet, but there is also a Juliet in Shakespeare's play Measure for Measure. Now there is a Jacques in As You Like It. He is not called Jacques Cartier, so I am taking a little bit of liberty here because obviously Jacques Cartier is his own person. He was a Breton explorer who claimed that Canada was for France. And anyway, he was the first European to describe and map the Gulf of St. Lawrence. He has a huge history all his own. So this is a little bit, he lived before Shakespeare was born. He was in the 16th century, but he's not a contemporary of William Shakespeare, and he is his own thing. So David Austin named this plant for the actual Jacques Cartier, but I included this rose on our list of Shakespeare roses because there's also a Jacques in Shakespeare's play As You Like It. David Austin has a Desdemona rose. Desdemona is from Shakespeare's play Othello. There is a second kind of Desdemona rose, which is a hedging rose, and if you're trying to be authentic and have borders around your garden, a hedging rose would be one way to do that. Gertrude, the Gertrude from Shakespeare is in Shakespeare's Hamlet. She has her own rose. Imogen is from Cymbeline. Olivia is from Twelfth Night. And then my personal, probably second favorite after the Sweet Juliet would be the Falstaff rose. Falstaff is an iconic character in William Shakespeare's plays, showing up in Henry IV Parts 1 and 2, Henry V, and Merry Wives of Windsor, which Queen Elizabeth commissioned particularly because she liked Falstaff. So I was very excited to see that David Austin had a Falstaff rose. I think he should get his own rose. Yes. So that's how you could start your Shakespeare rose garden. You could pick 2 or 3, up to 5 of these, plant a rose garden, have that be beautiful. And of course, I enjoy the fact that you can pick them and make bouquets so then they can come in your house. And then you could just add as you go along. Hopefully, this gets you started and tells you how you can bring this at home. Now, across the board, when people have planted Shakespeare gardens, here are some themes that you can include to be like the ones that already exist. Now, obviously, this is optional. You get to do whatever you want. But if you're like me and you really need some kind of structure and plan, here are some guidelines for what you might want to include as key fixtures in your Shakespeare garden. The Tudor gardens were typically symmetrical in some way. They would be divided up into rectangle plots. Sometimes they would have borders on them. Sometimes they were just rectangle sections, but symmetrical in some way. You might use raised beds. You might use boxwoods to hedge everything in, or just have squares on the ground. You might put a border around the whole thing. You decide, but neat and clean are a key feature of a Shakespeare garden. Another fun, and it sounds obvious after you say it, feature of a Shakespeare garden would be to have a weather-resistant statue or bust of William Shakespeare in your garden. You can find links to some of the ones that I found that you could put in your garden in the show notes below. And you could label all of your plants. We mentioned marking your memories, but you could also put little plaques with quotes from the plays on it. So as people walk through your garden, they can experience little snippets of Shakespeare's plays as they do that. Walkways and places to sit and enjoy your garden, as well as a sundial would be a fun feature in a Shakespeare garden. So those are all ways that you can plant a Shakespeare garden on your own at home. There are lots of books on this subject, on gardening and on planting herb gardens and Shakespeare gardens in particular. I will link to those in the show notes below. Many of these links that I'm including are affiliate links. We use affiliate links to help generate income here for That Shakespeare Life. So be aware that those links are affiliate links, but I'm also including the title and author. So if you do not want to purchase through an affiliate link, you can search it on Amazon, but the cost is the same. So with affiliate links, whether you buy it through my link or you go and find it on your own, there's no cost difference to you. If you do use my affiliate links, then you're helping to support the podcast. So I hope you will consider shopping with us when you buy your gear to make your Shakespeare garden at home. And of course, if you do make your Shakespeare garden, please send me pictures. I want to clap for you and cheer for you and say how lovely it looks. You can tag me on Twitter at That Shakespeare, or you can find me obviously here on YouTube or over on Facebook as well. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of our episode this Saturday. I'm here every week with even more Shakespeare history. So if you like what you learned today and you want to learn some more with us next Saturday, please hit subscribe and you'll be sure to not miss an episode. As a brand new announcement, you can support the podcast and our YouTube channel over on Patreon now. We have a brand new Patreon page. For just $5, you can get access to bonus stuff, which includes a printable guide to all of the plants that I mentioned today. It also lists out where in the plays these plants are mentioned. And so if you're doing things like the signs, all you have to do is hit print, and I will have made the sign up for you already. That guide will be available on Patreon for patrons. So find out all about that and how to get started at castycash.com/member. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.